Hello, I'm James Welch, and today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Annabel Venner, an award-winning global marketing leader who truly understands how to spark commercial growth and build brands through great marketing. Annabel has a fascinating background. Armed with a chemistry degree, she built her career at Coca-Cola driving B2C growth before making an unusual career segue into financial services as a global brand director and then a CMO at Hiscox, both here and in the UK and in Asia. Yes, these pods are gaining traction, as I know that two recent speakers have been approached for follow-up conversations that might well lead to projects. And that, I guess, is one way to validate their existence. The existence of the podcast, I mean, not of the previous guests. Oh, God. Today, Annabel has built an incredible portfolio career and a strategic marketing consultant, a fractional CMO, a non-executive director, and an industry mentor. She's brilliant, highly commercial, and unafraid to challenge the status quo. I hope you'll agree. Do let me know. Lovely to see you.
Thank you, James. Good to be here.
So let's launch straight in. I'd love to ask about signal and the noise. What have you seen in the press recently that struck you that was interesting?
Yeah, so it's not really this week, but it's a topical given where we are in February. And it was just a lot of things I was reading about Valentine's Day and the change, particularly driven by sort of different generation. And I sort of saw probably 2 or 3 articles that just talked about change coming from brands and obviously change coming from behavior. So one of the things was about, I think they called them sweethearts in different markets, but it's the equivalent of love hearts in our market, and how they had extended what was on them. So it didn't just say love or marry me or sweetheart. It was reflecting, I think, a bit more of the sort of the situation everybody's finding themselves with them. So it sort of said to cook for 2 or split the bill or that type of thing, or share the rent. So I think it was just reflecting the sort of the situation, and people it's not all about spending money and roses. It's about doing those practical things. And then there was other articles also that was just talking about, yes, people are still buying roses and, I don't know, gifts, big expensive gifts, but actually now there's a sort of trend towards buying things that are a lot more sort of probably practical and personable. So there was, rather than buying 12 red roses, people were getting bunches or bouquets done of their partner's favorite crisps or dips or something. So it became more humorous, very, very personable in terms of recognizing that person. So I just think it's interesting that that's going on. And I sort of see it a little bit with behavior of my sons and also their sort of their friends as well. And I see them often making gifts. So there's and it's quite surprising in this age group. So I've got a 20-year-old and 18-year-old, but spending their money and spending time on making gifts. So it's not the big showy gifts anymore. It's those gifts that are saying, I understand you, I understand what you like, what you don't like, and I'm putting the time and the effort into it. And I may cook you a meal rather than take you out to a flashy restaurant. And it was just a lot more articles that I'd seen, particularly around Valentine's Day this day, sort of reflecting that shift in behavior and what some brands were doing to capitalize on it.
It's really interesting. It's taking the Haagen-Dazsification. You remember how Haagen-Dazs took off at a time of economic crisis, and it was the little luxury that you could afford was their positioning. But it's actually making it less about Haagen-Dazs brand, but more about the personal side of things. Yeah. And it's the sort of the Etsy approach where you actually something for the people you love.
I personally would much rather receive a bouquet of, I don't know, I'm just trying to think, my favorite crisps or my whatever snacks than a dozen red roses, because I think it's more thoughtful. But I think there's 2 things. It's the thought thing, but also it's that it's reflecting that people have less cash in their pocket at the moment and what's going on with the economy. And I'll hear it, obviously we feel it more, or we see it and read about it in the UK. but I've had some friends over from the US recently, and they're seeing it over there, and they're seeing it with their kids as well. So it's not just, it's quite a widespread behavior change that's going on.
What do you think the implication is for this going forwards for the big brands? How can a big brand capitalize on this sentiment?
I think it is. I think it's just. I mean, what Love Hearts or Sweethearts did, I think, was quite clever in reflecting it. I doubt it probably drove a lot more sales for them, but I just think it was quite a clever move. But I think it is just really understanding that consumer behavior and what's going on, and doing stuff that is less showy and is more thoughtful in terms of how they're activating their brands, and just acknowledging, I think, what is going on out there, and how people are feeling about money and how people are feeling about value and some of the behavior changes. So I think it's just deep diving a lot into that consumer insight and not just going for the easy default promotions, particularly around things like Valentine's Day. It's probably too easy to do a, big flowers and chocolates things. So really think about how you can do something that demonstrates that you really understand what your target customers are thinking and feeling at that moment in time.
Be interesting to see how someone like Coke would take that one step further, rather than just share a Coke with personalization, but actually how do you make it more
correct.
of a moment, more of the Kodak moment type approach? Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the Coke thing now has been going on, that personalization, for a long time. So I don't know if it started when I was there, but they were doing things like when they were very strongly aligned with football, they were doing a lot of activity around demonstrating the value and the pride that you have in your club. So it's obviously still working with them, but I agree, it's about, can they take it a step further beyond having people's names, different names on cans of Coke?
Yeah, I think the cans of Coke, the share a Coke with thing, I first saw it when I was in Sydney 15 years ago now.
Yeah.
It would have been around that time. Which now you mentioned your time at Coke. I'd love to step to the next part of this question. Then is the next question, which is, how are you connecting the dots now, and where does this come to life within what you're up to at the moment, based on the career that you've had to date?
Yeah, I mean, I've had I don't know if you call it unusual, but doing my big stint at Coke and then leaving that to go and work for Hiscox and insurance.
Which is an obvious segue.
Obvious segue. Very few people do that. And then obviously making the shift from sort of B2C to B2B. But over the last probably nearly, it's coming up 6 years now since I've been doing my sort of alternative career, where I'm a trustee for a charity, and I'm still doing consulting or fractional work. I'm doing a lot of mentoring. But I'm still quite curious, and I think that came through my training I had at Coke. So I read a lot. I attend. I'm a member of different organisations. I join webinars. So I need to just plan it in, because you could get carried away and you could spend a huge amount of time doing this. But I do look and see what's going on in different markets. And I was quite lucky when I was at Hiscox. So I worked out in Asia for 4 months. I'm still really good friends with a lot of people out there. So if you look at things that I see, or my LinkedIn feed, it's not just UK focused. So I get that big international point of view. And I do deep dive into what's going on. As I said, I'm a member of different organizations. So they often put on sort of live events, and I go on and listen to talks. So there was a very interesting one done the other day on sort of GLP-1s, but beyond food differences. So in terms of what is that doing to the industry in terms of face creams? You can now have face creams if you're on a weight loss jab. You can have there's gyms that are putting on particular classes, because obviously you lose muscle in various places. It's affecting the clothing industry. So I'm really lucky in terms of I get that breadth now. And then when I'm working with clients, it depends on what I'm working with them. Sometimes it's looking at creative work. Sometimes it might be looking at how they set up and their organizational setup and structure. So I tend to just, because I have this sort of quite outside view, I tend to be able to look at solutions in a little bit of a different way. I mean, one of the things I did when I was at Hiscox is I tended to recruit from outside insurance, because I wanted people to come in who had that different perspective and could bring ideas in from different places. So I think that's one of the strengths that I bring when I'm working on clients on different problems that they've got.
I love that approach of bringing in the people with a breadth of experience into it, into a role. I remember my sister, when I was at university, I was thinking about what do I want to do next, and she said, well, whatever it is you want to do, you don't need to study it, because she worked in financial PR at the time, and was saying that people she finds the most interesting interviews are the ones who haven't studied marketing at university, but bring a different thought process to the new role.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think, maybe it's because I've taken a Ritson course in the past, where you just feel actually there are not enough people have taken marketing courses, and I do think that that's an important point that he's banging home, partly because he sells marketing courses.
No, but I also think it's important. So I mean, I did chemistry. Okay, so I didn't start in marketing. I worked for SmithKline Beecham, and then I got a move into their marketing and decided to stay in it. But once I'd made and committed to that move, I went off and did a advanced diploma at night school. I then was really lucky at Coke, because Coke had very good training consistently throughout the way. It was very, very important to them. So I was sort of trained in anything from, how to write a creative brief and work with your agency, through to all those basic principles. And I still argue today that those principles are the same, whether you work for a big brand, a small brand, whether it's direct to customers, whether it's B2B, B2C, the principles are the same. So I agree. I think learning is really, really important. But I think you can learn the principles, but there's so much more to being a marketeer, and being financially fluent is really important. And I think my chemistry degree gave me the confidence to be very happy with P&Ls and everything else.
Chemistry degree made me happy with P&Ls.
As in, I get numbers. I'm a very commercial marketer, that side of it.
So we met, you were mentioning organizations a minute ago. We met when I was based in the Middle East, and I was vice chair of the Marketing Society, and you were a keen part of the London HQ version of the Marketing Society. And then we met up for lunch one day around the corner from your office when I was in town. And soon after that, it was when you were off to Bangkok. Tell us about
to Singapore. Yes.
Singapore.
So Hiscox bought a business that was about 8 years old, I think, at the time, headquartered in Singapore and operated also out of Hong Kong and Thailand. And I was asked to go out there for 4 months to have a look at the structure, the team, the skill set, everything, and then do my recommendations. And actually, about 18 months or 2 years after I did that, I was then asked to be the CMO, but still based in London. So I spent a lot of time going out, and I loved it. I loved that opportunity. I thought it was fantastic. And there's lots of learnings there about, I think sometimes you could perceive Asia is Asia, but it's not. The behaviors, the insights are very, very different from Singapore to Hong Kong to Thailand. So, and also the way I think people are brought up and educated is quite different. So the way they respond in that office. But it was fantastic, really enjoyed it. And as I said, I've still got some very good friends from that stint that I did over 10 years ago.
I think it's such an important thing to have. We're all very lucky to have worked in different parts of the world. I think when I was based in Singapore, because I thought your direct Asia was based out of Thailand in my memory, but the difference that one sees on the ground, and the lack of homogeneity across from a long way away. Asia is just Asia, but then you get on the ground and you realize the Southeast Asian countries are also very, very different.
Yeah.
And then you one from a long way away, one might say, well, Asia could be India or China, and how different could they get?
But also it's interesting when you then this is the risk of looking at high level trends, because obviously in Singapore, digital adoption is huge. It's quite advanced. But then if you look at when I was out there 10 years ago, how they were buying car insurance, they do it all through agents or brokers, and those might be friends or family. So actually, when I was out there, the percentage of people who were very comfortable buying direct was very low. And that is in complete opposite to how they were engaging with digital in other different ways. So that's why you just need to be very careful when you look at high level trends, and you really need to dig in and sort of get into the detail underneath it.
I'm going to move to the next part of this podcast, if I may. It's the high five. So a quick round of 5 questions. I'm going to start with your hero. Who's your hero? Who do you admire for their ability to create signals or create sparks?
So I love, and I don't know if he's come up before, but I love listening to Rory Sutherland, because I just think he looks at things in a really, really different way. And I just go, oh my gosh, well, have you had the training, or is it just naturally? And he can talk on anything and everything. And he did a webinar the other day for the Marketing Society, and it was talking about the state that we're in as marketeers today and what we need to do to change it, and just the data he was pulling and the facts, and he was just talking about linking it to what's going on in other fields. It's just amazing. So long may he continue, because also he's just a very engaging person to listen to as well.
I'm very lucky as being within the WPP family. So at many an event and catching up with him and hearing him speak. I mean, I don't know the chap personally, but I'm a big fan as well. And actually his subject matter of behavioral science is such an interesting, there are so many people in that space that you go, oh, I wish I could make those connections and connect those dots in the way they do. The other chap who comes to mind is Rich Shotton. Have you met him?
Yes, no, I did. So I got him to come along and talk about an event I did when I was at Hiscox. And I can't remember, it was shortly after he had published a book. So I asked him to bring books, and I gave them to everybody there as well. Yes, there was lots of very practical things that he was talking about in terms of the way we would display information and data to persuade people maybe to look at a slightly higher price product. So he was very good as well.
Lots of interesting ways to display data. That reminds me of there was a book written maybe 20 years ago called Spurious Correlations. Okay. I'll ping you a link to it actually after this, and I'll put it in the chat for this podcast. Next question. Your best decision?
Leaving Coke and going to work at Hiscox. Definitely. In terms of, so I don't know if you want it in terms of career or anything, so I took it as a career thing, because I got exposed to, so I went from being, a good marketeer in a big company that had lots of budget and lots of money, but obviously you can't just do what you want, because you've got Atlanta in the head office, to then go and take a risk and go and work for, at the time, unknown insurer, really, and it was insurance. But if you look at what I was able to do during my time, the opportunities I got in terms of, going out to Asia, helping that business grow. We then expanded into Europe and the US, and also the huge amount of autonomy that I was given. And we did some really fun marketing, and I just loved it. And had a great team, great people, very entrepreneurial, and took big bets. So I think it just gave me that exposure across the full marketing mix beyond what I could have ever achieved if I'd stayed at Coke.
I think that's really interesting, because people would presume that big, exciting Coca-Cola would be way more big and exciting than a little known insurance company, and insurance being the dry financial institution that would suggest that you wouldn't have as much fun. But then actually to say, when you're on the inside, it's the fun that you make because you have to try harder and look at how to make that stand out and to become more engaging. I think that's really interesting. What's your worst decision then, Annabel?
So I've got to, so one was joining the wrong company. So this was a career one, which is where I started off my career at SmithKline Beecham. They then bought, I think it was Sterling Healthcare, and I'd shifted into marketing, and I'd made a decision to stay, but I got made redundant. And I was absolutely terrified at that time. I probably was mid-20s, and I took the first job that I was offered, and I went to work for a tobacco company. So I'm not a smoker. I never have been a smoker, but I really did not think about the job, the culture, the people. And, I've just talked about the best thing was Hiscox because the culture was great and entrepreneur. This was completely wrong in terms of the culture that would suit me and get the best out of me. And I very quickly realized, luckily, so I left quite quickly, but it taught me a lot about making sure that you really, really understand what a business is like, what your role is going to be, how it operates. So I learned a lot from that at the time. And probably other bad ones have just been around when I first set up to do what I do today, was to say yes to everything, again, without really thinking about what are these people like I'm going to be working with? Is it really clear what they want me to do or what the problem is? So I now ask a lot more questions going into talk to potential clients.
That's very interesting so really clarifying what the goal needs to be to see if you are the right person to be doing it, or if they really want to go where they say they want to go. Yes, I respect that. What's your funniest moment?
So this again is at Hiscox. So this was the first TV ad I made with them, and this is sort of, I don't know, it's just industry, it's just where we are with sort of economy. We were shooting an ad that was set predominantly in London, but we were making it in Berlin because it was cheaper. So we were on these streets and we had red, we got the company had brought in, our post boxes, there was black cabs around. So it was just, and cars, cars with the UK, and it just was a very almost surreal situation. But it's a funny moment now. It was less funny at the time. We also were doing a very, very early morning shoot in a sort of tower block, and it was set up like an office. And we were shooting so we could get footage of the sun coming up and somebody getting to an office very early. And I was not up there. I was looking what was going on, based in a car on the street. And what happened, because of the lights that there were, they triggered the sprinklers in the building. So suddenly obviously they thought there was a fire. So all these sprinklers came on, and we were being fed that this was going on. And I was sat there, and my first thought was, please don't tell me that Hiscox is the insurer on this shoot, because we did a lot of film. Well, luckily we weren't, but it was just one of those moments where I sat there going, how am I going to explain this back to head office that I've been on a shoot and we've just incurred tens or £100,000 worth of damage? But look, it was fine in the end. But it was just a funny moment. It was a funny week, the whole thing.
I love that when the travels don't go quite to plan.
Yeah.
That's very good.
Yeah.
And my last question is a bright spark. I'm going to ask you someone to recommend to come on a podcast, but of course, to come on the podcast, they have to have been, we'll have to invite them along to a dinner if they'd be so inclined, or if they're in the right city at the right time. Yes.
So I mean, I'm lucky. I work with lots of people at the moment because some of my work comes in direct and some of it comes through agencies. And I so one of the people that I just always have very good conversations with, whether it's with him and his team, is Michael Islip. So I don't know if you've ever come across him. So he currently runs an agency at the moment, and they work across multiple different clients. I've done some work with them probably over the last 2 or 3 years. And he was the one whose team did the really good session about GLP-1s. And I just find I have good conversations with him, and there's lots of very good discussions. And he works with a really good small team, and then has lots of people around him like me who he can pull in when he has different projects. So I've done some great work with him, particularly a couple of years ago when we were chatting to a client just about sort of customer trends and what was going on and how they should make them relevant. But he's very knowledgeable across lots of different things, and particularly at the moment with a lot of work on AI, but it's practicality in terms of the sort of marketing consumer side as well. So I definitely think he'd make a good guest.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Annabel, really lovely to catch up with you, and I look forward to catching up with you in person sometime soon.
Excellent. Hopefully at your next dinner party.
In the twilight, we gather around the table, stories to share, ideas unstable with signals bright. Through data we roam, creating sparks.